I spent my life trying to honor a family name I thought I belonged to, until I found out I was just a placeholder. At my grandfather's memorial dinner, my grandmother introduced my half-brother, someone I never knew existed, as the true heir. She humiliated my mom in front of everyone and called me weak, soft, and a mistake. Months later, she begged me to come back. They say every family has secrets. But mine wasn't just a hidden story. It was an entire script I didn't know I'd been cast in, a part I was trained to play from birth, all while someone else had been quietly waiting behind the curtain, rehearsing for my role. What I found wasn't just betrayal, it was a carefully managed illusion. A file box, a name I wasn't supposed to know, and the realization that everything I believed about my family was staged. I wasn't the heir to anything. I was the cover-up. My name is Callum. I'm 21 years old, currently in my last year of college, trying to navigate a world that suddenly feels more uncertain than ever. Ever since I was a kid, I gravitated toward sketchbooks, music, and quiet corners. I loved to draw, to observe more than speak, and I found comfort in solitude. I was never the kid who charged headfirst into a game of football or raised his hand first in class discussions. I was soft-spoken, introverted, more drawn to gallery walls than gym walls. But in my family, those traits didn't count. Strength meant physical toughness. Leadership, command, emotion was weakness. So when it came time to choose a college major, I didn't get much of a choice at all. I was told political science was respectable, strategic, and most importantly, aligned with the Mace name. There was no room for art in a family of soldiers. No room for hesitation. No room for me. On paper, I'm the kind of student professors nod at approvingly, the kind who shakes hands with alumni at networking events and makes eye contact in class. People often say I have a good head on my shoulders. What they don't know is how heavy that head feels most days, like I'm walking around with a storm trapped inside it. My family, at least how we looked from the outside, was what you'd call admirable. We were the kind of family neighbors used as a benchmark. A stoic father, a gentle mother, a tidy house with a flag out front, and rose bushes carefully trimmed along the walkway. We had Sunday dinners without phones on the table, polite laughter, and homemade meals. From a distance, we looked like we had it all figured out. I grew up believing in the myth of the Mace legacy. My father, Theron Mace, was a decorated Army veteran, tall, serious, structured. The kind of man who seemed to hold himself together through sheer discipline. He spoke rarely, and when he did, his words landed like stone. My grandmother, Marla Vexley, revered him. In fact, she revered our entire family history. She would often pull out old black and white photos of men in uniform, tell stories of medals won, battles fought, and sons returning home to build more sons. She called it a bloodline of honor, and as the only grandson, I was the next in line to carry that flame. I was supposed to carry the torch. I was supposed to make them proud. But pride, I would later learn, is a mask that fits very tightly, and sometimes it chokes you. I was told I came from a line of honorable men, a military legacy that traced back generations. My father, Theron Mace, was a decorated veteran. My grandmother, Marla Vexley, practically glowed when she talked about our family's name. I was supposed to carry the torch. That kind of legacy is hard to live under when you start noticing the cracks. It started small. My mom, Serafina, would disappear into the garden for hours and come back with red eyes. Dad would spend entire evenings in his study, sipping whiskey, staring at nothing. There was always this heaviness in the house, like the air was thicker there than anywhere else, and yet, I ignored it. I thought maybe all families were like this behind closed doors. Until I found the box. It was over the summer, right before I went back for my senior year. The kind of quiet, humid afternoon where everything feels still but heavy. I was helping Dad clean out the garage, something we rarely did together, and it felt like we were trying to bond over the past instead of the present. We were supposed to be looking for an old tent for a hiking trip he mentioned once, but never planned again. While he stepped outside to take a call, I wandered to the back of the garage, behind the dusty Christmas bins, high school trophies no one had touched in years, and crates of forgotten tools. That was when I saw it, a worn, dark green file box with a rusted latch, wedged behind an old cooler. It didn't stand out, at least not in the way that would normally grab your attention. But something about it made me stop. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was the way it looked like it didn't want to be found. I don't even remember reaching for it. It was like my body moved before my mind could catch up. I flipped the latch open, and inside were papers, letters, printed emails, photos, even receipts. I eyed thumbing through them casually. At first, but with every page my stomach dropped lower. Some were photos of my dad with women I didn't recognize. Others were screenshots of flirty, suggestive emails, dates, times, hotel names, receipts for dinners, motels, gas stations. It didn't stop. My hands began to tremble. I kept reading. Some of the documents were dated years before I was even born. Others were from when I was a child. He had been cheating on my mom for decades. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a lifestyle. One of the folders was labeled S, and I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was my mom's. She had printed them. She had organized them. She had known. The air felt thick in my throat. My ears rang. I felt like I had opened a trap door in the floor of my life, and now I was free-falling. This man who sat across from me every Thanksgiving, who told me to keep my promises, who stood up straight at parades and called himself a man of honor. He had built that image on lies, and my mom, my quiet, strong mother, had been living with this weight, carrying it like it was her duty. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring into that box like it might explain itself. Like maybe it would tell me what to do next. But it didn't. It just sat there, unbothered, holding everything I didn't want to know. I put the box back exactly where I found it, shut the latch, closed the door. That night, I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling, my thoughts spinning so fast I couldn't hold on to a single one. I felt hollow, betrayed, small, like I had been handed a version of my life that wasn't real. And now I had to figure out which parts were still true. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. Weeks passed before I worked up the nerve to bring it up to my mom. I carried that box in my mind every day, its contents playing on loop in my thoughts like a film I couldn't pause. I didn't tell her what I found. It felt too raw, too intrusive, like saying it out loud would make it even more real. Instead, one evening, as we sat outside watching the sky turn from orange to deep violet, I turned to her and asked, almost too softly, if she had ever regretted staying with Dad. She didn't answer right away. She blinked slowly, like the question had unlocked something long buried. I saw the breath catch in her chest, the way her hands clenched lightly on her lap, as if bracing for impact. Her eyes welled up, but no tears fell. Just a long glassy sheen that made her look both older and stronger somehow. Then she looked at me. Not past me, not through me, but right into me and said, "There were many nights I wished I had walked away. But then I looked at you and I knew why I stayed." Her voice didn't crack. It was calm, almost too calm, and that made it hit even harder. It didn't sound like someone reliving a heartbreak. It sounded like someone who had built a home inside of it. Her words carried the weight of someone who had cried all the tears she had, screamed all the anger into pillows years ago, and now sat at the shoreline of her grief, watching the tide roll in without resistance. It was equal parts love and resignation, a confession and a sacrifice wrapped into one. And I felt it, all of it. The pain of knowing she stayed in a house that never truly protected her. The guilt of being the reason she endured it. The silent pride she must have swallowed daily to appear composed for my sake. I wanted to hug her, to say I was sorry for asking, but part of me also needed to know what her silence had cost her. But I couldn't stop there. I needed more. I needed to hear it from him. So I asked my dad. We were walking in the park near campus, a place where he always seemed more human, more reachable. I waited until we were past the noisy street and under a canopy of trees where the world felt quieter, more honest. I asked him casually, trying to keep my voice steady, if he'd ever been unfaithful. He didn't flinch. He didn't pause to lie. He just said, only once, before we were married. She was overseas. It was a mistake. His tone was dry, almost indifferent, like we were talking about a forgotten bill or a missed appointment. There was no shame in his eyes, no weight in his shoulders. I nodded, pretended to believe him, smiled, even. But something cracked in me that day. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sorrow. It was something colder, like a fracture that runs silent and deep, invisible until you try to stand on it. That was the day I realized my father had made peace with his version of the truth, and that version had no space for mine. The final straw came during a family dinner. It was meant to be a memorial for my grandfather, an evening that was supposed to celebrate family unity, legacy, and memory. The room was dimly lit, everyone dressed formally, the air filled with the scent of roasted meat and old wine. Halfway through the evening, Marla stood up, glass in hand, and began a toast. Her voice carried with that same proud, performative tone she used whenever the family name was mentioned. "It's a proud thing," she said, "to know our legacy continues, not just through Callum, but through our Lucas as well." A thick silence fell over the table. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered onto the plate. Heads turned. Confused glances were exchanged. And then, as if perfectly staged, the front door opened, and in walked Lucas. He looked every bit the prodigal son, tall, composed, dressed in a sharp navy blazer, with a military pin on the lapel. People gasped. My aunt stood up to greet him. My mom sat frozen. My father didn't even flinch. He just poured himself another drink. And then Marla turned to me, eyes narrowed, smile thin and cold. She said clearly, so that everyone could hear, "You've always tried, Callum, but you never had the blood of a warrior. Your mother softened you." I blinked, confused. But before I could say anything, she turned to the doorway and gestured dramatically. "Lucas," she announced, "is the future of this family." The room shifted. Heads turned. The front door opened, and in walked a stranger. A tall man with confident posture, wearing a blazer with military pins and a smug expression, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this performance. Gasps rippled across the table. My aunt even clapped her hands to her mouth. My mom sat frozen, wide-eyed and pale. My father didn't even react, just quietly refilled his drink. "Who is that?" I asked, even though deep down, I already knew. Marla's smile grew sharper. "Your brother," she said. "The one who carries our legacy." The words struck me like a slap. A brother I'd never met. A truth I'd never been told. Everyone seemed to be waiting for my reaction. I stood slowly, my chest heaving. "You kept this from me? You knew this whole time?" I looked from my father to Marla. "And now you spring it on me like this? At a memorial dinner?" Marla didn't blink. "We didn't tell you because you weren't ready. You're too emotional, too soft. Just like your mother." I opened my mouth, stunned. "My mother?" "Yes, your mother," she snapped, her tone turning sharp, venomous. "She coddled you, turned you into this fragile, indecisive thing. Always painting, always dreaming. That's not what this family needs. She made you weak." I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. "You think weakness is having feelings? You think softness is failure? She's had to swallow her dignity every day in this house, while you and Dad sat on your thrones pretending honor meant silence." Marla raised a brow. "Don't blame us for her inadequacies. She was never one of us. She was convenient." I felt my hands curl into fists. Convenient, she gave up everything to be here. To raise me, while your son was out sleeping with other women. And you covered for him. You call that honor? Some relatives gasped quietly, but most stayed silent, unmoved, as if none of this was new. I looked around. You all knew, didn't you? You knew about him, about Lucas, about the affairs. And none of you said a damn thing. No one met my eyes. Marla scoffed. She knew what she signed up for. She knew the kind of man she married. I stepped back like I'd been struck. You're disgusting. Marla gestured again to the man at the doorway. Lucas is what this family needs. A real mace. A soldier. A man. I was already trembling. I reached for my wineglass and slammed it against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 sparkling shards. If this family's legacy is lies, manipulation and betrayal, I shouted, then I want no part of it. Keep your legacy. I'm done. My mom stood too, tears running silently down her face. She reached for me. My dad stayed seated, swirling his glass like none of it concerned him. She reached for me. My dad stayed seated, swirling his glass like none of it concerned him. I left the house that night and never looked back.
I didn't go home after that.
But a few nights later, my mom came to visit me. She didn't call, just showed up at my apartment, standing in the doorway with the same weary eyes I saw back at that dinner table. I let her in without a word. We sat on my small couch for a long time before she spoke. And when she did, her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I think you deserve to know everything, she said. She told me that her marriage to my father wasn't built on love. It was arranged, engineered. Really, by Marla. My dad had just finished a tour overseas, and military life came with benefits. If you were married, housing, extra pay, less risk of reassignment. Marla didn't want her son distracted or relocated, so she encouraged him to settle down quickly with someone who wouldn't make waves, someone like my mom who was quiet, respectful, and alone on base. She made me feel like I was a convenience, my mom said, eyes on her hands. She didn't want a daughter-in-law, she wanted a placeholder, someone she could control. Marla never missed a chance to remind her of that. From day one she would nitpick everything. How my mom cooked, how she dressed, even the tone of voice she used when answering the phone. She mocked her for being too soft-spoken and too polite, claiming that real Mace women were assertive and strong. My mom once made a lasagna for a holiday dinner, spending the whole day in the kitchen. Marla took one bite, then set down her fork and said, "Tastes like someone who doesn't know what she's doing." When guests were over, Marla made sure to subtly humiliate her, cutting her off in conversation, correcting her stories or acting surprised when she said anything remotely intelligent. My mom told me about a time she tried to suggest a change in the family vacation schedule because I had summer camp. Marla laughed and said, "Let the men decide, dear. You're here to follow, not lead." And when my father started drifting away, emotionally, physically, it wasn't just his own decision. Marla had encouraged it. She said a man like Theron needed space, needed to be reminded of what he could have. My mom said, her voice cracking for the first time. And then she introduced him to someone, said it would help him relax. That was the first time he cheated. "I was pregnant with you." My chest felt like it had collapsed inward. Every truth unraveled another thread of the life I thought I knew. "And Lucas?" I asked, though I already knew. She nodded. She knew. She supported them, visited, sent money. And she made me promise never to tell you, said if I did, she'd cut us off. No help, no support, nothing. My mother looked at me then, and her eyes were full of so many years she had carried alone. "I stayed because I thought you deserved one parent who believed in you, even if everything else around you was built on sand." I reached for her hand. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. We sat like that for a long time, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in the betrayal. She had been living it far longer than I had. Weeks turned into months. I blocked their numbers, changed apartments, focused on school, tried to forget. Then came the call. Lucas had stayed with Marla for a few months. At first, she paraded him around to friends and neighbors, introducing him as the rightful heir to the Mace name. He was her trophy, her proof that all the years of secrecy and betrayal had led to something she could be proud of. But behind closed doors, the truth came out fast. He didn't work, not even a little. He slept in until noon, raided her liquor cabinet, and spent his days playing video games or calling old army buddies to ask for favors. When Marla asked him to take out the trash or help her with something as simple as replacing a light bulb, he'd laugh and call her the maid. He pawned my grandfather's watch, something passed down through 3 generations, for cash, and when she confronted him, he told her he was just borrowing against his future inheritance. He brought girls home at all hours, some of them loud and visibly intoxicated. Once a neighbor called Marla at 3 a.m. because one of Lucas's guests was screaming outside her house. She was mortified. Lucas found it hilarious. And then, the final blow. She found out he had drained one of her savings accounts. Over $200,000 gone. He claimed it was to invest in a business venture that never existed. After that, he vanished. No note, no apology, just gone. She tried to call him. He blocked her number. No one else was there when she collapsed from a stroke. She was stable, the nurse told me, but fading. She wanted to see me. I didn't go. She wrote me a letter. A real one. Shaky handwriting, tear-stained. In it she confessed everything. She had known about Lucas from the beginning. She had helped his mother financially behind my mom's back. She had demanded Serafina stay silent or be thrown out, even as my mom raised me in that house with grace and dignity. She admitted that she saw me as a placeholder, a temporary figure until the real heir was old enough. I was the safe bet, the obedient shadow of what she thought a Mace should be. But when Lucas showed his true colors, when he humiliated her, when he mocked her, when he gutted her bank account and walked out without looking back, she realized the brutal truth. She had created that monster. She had fed it with pride and ego and let it grow in the absence of conscience. And suddenly, everything she thought she valued meant nothing. She said, I had been the one with honor all along. That my quiet resolve, my loyalty, the way I carried pain without throwing it back at the world. Those were the traits she should have nurtured. And now, in her final days, she wanted me to return, not just to say goodbye, but because she still held on to the impossible hope that I might pick up the legacy she had poisoned, that I might return and make it mean something again. She said she knew she didn't deserve to ask, but she was afraid to die knowing she'd pushed away the only person who might have stayed. She admitted that she saw me as a placeholder, a temporary figure until the real heir was old enough. But then, when Lucas showed his true colors, when he treated her the way she had treated others, she saw it, what real integrity looked like. She said I had been the one with honor, all along, that she had spent years worshiping the wrong traits in men, and she asked me to come, not because she deserved it, but because she was afraid to die alone, knowing she'd pushed away the only person who might have stayed. I visited her 2 days later. She was thinner than I remembered. Her hand trembled when she reached for mine. I sat beside her. Quiet, she cried. I didn't. I told her I forgave her. But not for her. For me. Because carrying hate felt heavier than walking away. And forgiveness, I've come to learn, doesn't mean compliance. It doesn't mean reigning to the roles we were forced into, or reviving the broken blueprints others tried to hand us. She looked up at me, tears streaking down her face, and reached for my hand. I gave it to her, for one brief second, long enough to see the relief break across her features. And then I let go. I forgive you, I said softly, but I don't love you. Not the way you wanted. That's something you have to earn. And you never did. I turned and walked out. She asked, choked through tears, if I would come back, carry the name, take the place that was once meant for Lucas. I paused in the doorway. I won't carry your legacy, I said, but I will carry my own, and I'll do it without lies, without cruelty, and without pretending to be someone else to earn love. I looked back once. She was still crying, hands suspended in the air where mine had been. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most end up being the ones who wound us the deepest. And sometimes, the strength it takes to break a cycle is heavier than the pain of staying silent. I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not the same. If you made it this far, thank you for listening.